Hello, Star Trek fans, and welcome to Star Trek Prodigy, a ReBingeIt podcast. My name is James.
And my name is Kim. And we're watching and overanalyzing every episode of Star Trek Prodigy like true Star Trek geeks. Hit it. Welcome back to the podcast. Today we are on Supernova Part 2, the season finale of Season 1. The description from Paramount Plus is, as the Federation hangs in the balance, the crew must make the ultimate sacrifice to save Starfleet's future.
Called it. Ultimate sacrifice. Well, kind of.
Yeah, some of our speculation was on the nose, and some was not.
Your major point was quite correct.
Yeah, the Protostar had to go. Before we get started, I want to welcome any new listeners and let you know that we start by walking through the episode and discussing and analyzing as we go, but we really dig in after the walkthrough and we talk about what stood out for us, and then we read any feedback we may have received, and we always hear specifically from our 7-year-old correspondent, Mahi. She always has something interesting to say. And then we discuss character development and the Star Trekkiness of the episode, and then we kind of close with rating and speculation. We take feedback from facebook.com/groups/Star Trek TTM podcast and also from our email, RebingeIt@gmail.com. These are all in the show notes. There hasn't been a lot of discussion on our Facebook group about Prodigy. It's been pretty quiet for some reason. Maybe the crowd isn't into the animated series. I'm not sure. But I don't think any of us really expected it to be such a sincere show. Yeah, it's for kids, but it's also for any Trek fan. This isn't like some crappy Saturday morning cartoon. This is something serious.
Do you think too many people were expecting it to be Star Trek, the animated series level of quality?
Maybe. I also wonder if Star Trek Lower Decks sort of interfered with the perception of the show as well, because this is not that either.
Oh, no. This is its own animal entirely.
Yeah, this is much more, I would say, like a Star Trek show, where Lower Decks is really just a parody.
I think the thing about this show is you could take these episodes, these show concepts, and it would work as a live-action show.
Absolutely. The Star Trek ideals are at the heart of this show, and it's very different with Star Trek Lower Decks.
Yeah.
That show doesn't really exist without something to make fun of.
Right.
And it, too, has a heart that comes out every now and then, but this one is much different. It is much more focused on those ideals and what it means to these kids, this new crew, and really what it means to those of us who've watched Star Trek our whole lives.
That's a good summary.
Yeah. So anyway, I think we're ready to start the show.
Let's get underway. We immediately return to the action with a tracking shot moving through a debris field of Federation ships, including the severed nacelle of NCC 63459, also known as the Thunderchild. Apparently this ship is important or well-known or something. Anyway. All these ships are trashed, probably completely destroyed. These are going to need more than a minor refit and repair. It's not looking good. But going through the debris field, we reach the Protostar, where Gwyn says, "We can't stop the signal. It's annihilation." Dal finally reaches the most Star Trek of solutions and says, "We have to blow up the ship."
Jankum tells him it's impossible because if they blow up the ship, everything in a 50 million mile radius goes with it.
Yeah.
And Janeway confirms that's true.
It's not too bad. I mean, that's only half the distance between Earth and the Sun. From reading from the NASA pages, you'd need to be about 25 light years away from a supernova to be at minimum safe distance.
Right.
Not so good.
Yeah. Well, while they're talking, Rock is thinking, and she comes up with a plan to make a proto-jump while detonating the core. Zero confirms this idea, and we get a nice animation sequence showing the explosion would be spread out over light years. Gwen says the destruction here is minimal. No one gets hurt. I did really like this visual because of the technobabble, which can be quite intense if that wasn't making sense to you. This was like a nice, clear picture of how we're just going to spread out the explosion. So it's smaller explosions throughout a very long distance.
And the use of visual aids is very helpful. Typically, this didn't happen on TNG or DS9.
No, you just got the technobabble.
Yeah.
Well, Janeway suggests that they replicate an escape shuttle so that they don't have to be on the ship when it explodes. I thought here earlier Gwen said they couldn't warp away, so I was a little confused about how come they could now get away. Was it just that now they gain control of the engine so they could at least use impulse power to get away?
I assumed they'd managed to, through Zero's hot wiring, get enough control of the ship that they could use the impulse engines and actually get away from the main battle.
Okay.
Dal realizes with the controls fried, someone will need to stay behind and make the jump. He says, as captain, he should do it.
Yeah.
So this is the second time Dal is moving to make the true Starfleet captain selfless action. I'm going down with the ship.
Yeah, Dal's come a long way since episode 1.
Do we know anybody on that ship?
Show of hands. Do you know anybody on that ship?
Which was from the Kobayashi Maru episode.
Yes.
Holo Janeway tells him, I can do it. I have your control codes. So she volunteers to do it. Rock really doesn't like this, calling Janeway her friend.
Yeah.
But Holo Janeway has a plan. Upload her program into an isolinear chip so they can take her with them.
Yeah, she says, then I can be in 2 places at once.
Jankum tells them it will take any engineer a day to make the modification. But he's not just any engineer.
Yeah. Impulse engines are back online and Zero pilots the ship away from the carnage.
Yep.
On the Dauntless, Tysus, also known as Antanas, asks, what are they doing? And Admiral Janeway replies, saving us all.
Jankum has finished modifying the protocore and it will explode when they jump. And in a comment worthy of Scotty himself, tells Dal, Jankum's not just an engineer, he's a miracle worker.
Gosh, I like Jankum.
Yes.
Rock and Gwyn are working on the replicated escape shuttle. They've stripped it down to absolute basics, and Rock has forgotten to add seats.
There's always something.
Yeah. Gwyn suggests maybe they just go with just hold on to your butt grab handles.
It'll work.
Meanwhile, on the bridge, Janeway is uploading her program to the isolinear chip, and she gets the message insufficient capacity, and it's clear that this part of the plan is not working.
Yeah.
Holo Janeway gasps, but she covers when Dal enters. She still gives him an isolinear chip as the others arrive, and Zero says we need to go. Janeway hugs Murph as he makes little happy purring noises.
Yes. Jankum laments, all this time, all the effort we put into this ship, and now we're going to have to blow it up. Rock tells him, just think of it as we're letting a young star become what it's meant to be. I do have to bring up here that a supernova is what very old stars can become when they explode. So,
yes.
I mean, ultimately, it might have been what this protostar would become, but they're all skipping all the bits in the middle.
Yeah, the millions of years in between.
Yeah, exactly. Did you think the Janeway hologram's voice was starting to crack here?
I listened to it multiple times when she was saying goodbye, and I don't think it cracked, but you could hear the emotion.
Yeah.
She did a few times sigh and the gasping and those little things, which we don't see her doing very frequently.
Yes, I felt they gave the hologram an emotional response to the way it was behaving.
Yeah. And also during the scene, they're playing this sweet, uplifting music as everyone thinks the plan is on track, and they are really toying with our emotions.
Oh, yeah, that could be the alternative name for this episode.
That's true. Before the bridge door closes, Janeway tells them it was an honor to serve alongside them. Dal says, we'll see you on the other side. And then the door closes, and Holo Janeway does this deep sigh.
Yes.
And I think this was when I first started crying in this episode. I'm like, oh no, don't take my Janeway.
Yeah, I think as Star Trek nerds, we know where this is going.
Yes, because the music is also telling us. The crew climbs into the shuttle, and as the music swells, Dal takes a last look around before closing the hatch.
Kind of like that.
And then the cargo bay door opens. They all hold hands as the shuttle is bumpily ejected out into space. And the music and the way they were holding hands, I mean, I was full on crying in this scene because they're all really scared, but they're holding on to each other for comfort and they're smiling at each other to show that they're trying to be strong. And it was such a meaningful scene.
Yes.
Then the music on top of that was just killing me. Even the third time I watched it, it was still getting me. Because they've all gotten to this point now where not only do they believe in Starfleet because of Holo Janeway and everything that they've gone through, but they believe in each other. And even though they're clearly scared and they're, about to hop out of their spaceship into space with a ship that doesn't have a lot of controls, doesn't have a lot of engines, doesn't have any frills.
Doesn't have any navigation.
And they don't know yet, doesn't have Holo Janeway.
Yeah.
But they're holding on to each other and they're believing that they're going to be okay.
Agreed.
And that was just very emotional. I'm just a sucker for it.
Yeah, it was beautifully put together.
Yes. Well, the music continues to build as Holo Janeway sits in the big chair, and she brings the protocore online and says, on my mark, go fast. That was totally cool that she used Dal's catchphrase.
Yeah, I think Dal might have been wearing off on her a bit too.
Maybe. We see the Protostar jump, then explode, and left behind is a huge new nebula as the crew gaze at the new phenomena, and it's absolutely beautiful on screen.
Oh, agreed. The animation work in this one has some just beautiful background stills.
Yeah. I didn't even see this the first time I watched it because I was so busy crying. When I got to the second time through, then I saw it.
Oh, you can't miss that. It looks fantastic. Beautiful piece of computer art. Back to the battle, and the Klingon warbird is still absorbing hits from other ships, defending the Dauntless. But she's taken one too many, and we now see that her shields are down. The Klingon captain puts the ship between the Dauntless and another Federation vessel powering up to fire. She and the crew's places in Sto-vo-kor are assured, and they prepare to take the hit. But suddenly the Federation ship powers down and doesn't fire. Triumphant music starts to play as we go to the Dauntless, and Tysis reports, "We're no longer locked out." And on the view screen, the lights of the Federation vessels start to turn blue again. And I'm just going to say, Janeway and the hologram, all that got you. This Klingon scene got me.
Oh, really?
Oh, God, yeah.
When she was just ready to take the hit.
Totally. Gets me every time. This is almost worthy of ramming speed.
I get it. Janeway orders Tysis to send out a search party to find where the crew is. He tells her it could take months to scan every star system, but she doesn't care. She says, sort of out to the ether, "You've got this far. Wherever you are, don't give up now." Though technically, she doesn't know if they even got off the ship at this point.
Oh, that's true.
And the camera pans out showing just a horribly damaged Dauntless.
Yeah, it's taken a beating. In the shuttle, the crew plug in the hologram, and instead of getting Janeway, they get a pre-recorded message. She tells them she's sorry. She lied to them. Because of the time she spent with him, her program had become too large. She couldn't be removed from the ship in time.
Dao realizes she sacrificed herself and tells the others she stayed on the ship. And everyone cries, including me, as she says that she's so proud of everything they've accomplished and that together their potential is infinite. And she says, "And now, go boldly."
Oh.
And we get, at this moment, the classic Star Trek theme as she fades away. Someone whispers the name, Janeway, and they all look up through the window in the shuttle. And Dal smiles and says, "Always telling us what to do, even to the end."
Yes.
Oh my gosh, that scene where they're all looking up. That was amazing.
Yeah, it was beautifully put together.
I did think here that when Holo Janeway, when she was upset that this wasn't working, she's a hologram. I'm not sure she feels bad that she's not going to survive. But what I think she was feeling bad about was that the crew was going to be upset.
Oh, that would make sense because she really does see them as her charges.
Yep.
We now go to Starfleet headquarters 1 month later, where a Vulcan is detailing the destruction of the Protostar. And he says the explosion caused an interspatial rift. In other words, a wormhole.
This jump to Starfleet from this battle that seemed hopeless was a shock to the system at this point in the episode. I did not expect it.
Wow, yeah, it was a heck of a cut.
Yeah, but also, I think we were all under the impression that this attack from the living construct was going to be like a virus.
Yeah.
And that it was going to spread from ship to ship. And it didn't really need the Protostar to be there. And so I wasn't really clear on what difference it was going to make when the Protostar left. So I went back and watched Moral Star Part 2, and I listened very carefully this time to what the diviner said. And what he says is, when the Protostar comes in contact with a Starfleet vessel, then the problems begin.
Yeah.
But he doesn't say they'll start to infect each other.
So the living construct basically needs some way of contacting or being in communication with those other ships to maintain its control.
I guess so.
It's not a self-replicating virus.
Yeah, I guess so. Although now, can it do that with any Starfleet ship without it contacting it? Because that was the thing. They were waiting for one of them to make a link. Now that they've had the link, could the Protostar continue to do that if it came in contact with more Starfleet ships? I guess we will never know.
My take on that would be it would need the other ship to still be in contact with the living construct. Yeah. So it could contact ship 1, which could contact ship 2, and it could create a network that way.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Controlling all of them. But once you destroy the living construct or sever it somehow, then its control all through the network then drops.
And it was almost like a video game when the construct was cycling through all of the ships that it could control. It was like, it's like you're switching ships in a game.
Yeah, it was looking for ways of customizing them as well. It wanted the engine upgrades. Yes. The Vulcan continues that through this interspatial rift, they've picked up a new message from Chakotay.
He also says here that they picked up the signal from the Protostar, but not the one that was destroyed.
Yes, he says it's from another time. 52 years in the future. Also, the hologram Janeway duplicated the parameters that Chakotay was lost in, creating an interspatial flexure into an alternative future. Time travel.
Yep.
The Vulcan finishes by saying there are discussions of sending an exploratory ship. And Janeway is immediately, yeah, I want to be on that.
Yes. Well, this little discussion is interrupted by a Starfleet officer who comes running in saying, "Admiral, it's them." And we see a crowd has gathered outside watching as shuttles descend towards wreckage floating under the Golden Gate Bridge. And we see it's the Protostar crew.
Yes.
One of the shuttles, by the way, has NCC 74656-A marked on it. We see you, Voyager reference. You can't hide from us.
I'm glad they survived the water landing.
Yes. It's surprising maybe that they got by everything and nobody noticed until they landed. But maybe they didn't. Maybe somebody did notice, but they don't have any weapons on board, so they seemed harmless.
There is now a Starfleet trial or tribunal, and they keep referring to the charges against our heroes. One of the panels says, "Good intentions do not make up for Federation crimes." Janeway is defending them and gives a rousing speech about their achievements, saying, "Without their intervention, I cannot say if all of us would be sitting here right now." She brings up Dal and says, "Is he genetically engineered? Yes. Was he enhanced in every way? Look at him. Of course not."
Burn!
Yes, that's both a burn and a compliment, I think. It's very strange.
And Dal's like,
Do I say thanks?
That was very funny.
Yes, that was a really nice touch. And what's been incredibly serious to this point.
Yeah, I mean, she's just trying to say that he's
not a super person.
Yeah, he's just trying to say it's not like he's been turned into a superhero. Exactly.
Yes.
I didn't understand all the arguments in the scene. Why can't they still do the psych evals and the tests? Starfleet is so weird.
Well, I took from that these guys were deliberately just putting roadblocks in.
Yeah, well, bureaucracy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they're all probably evil Starfleet admirals.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's the kind of thing they would do.
For sure. But also, I don't think we wanted to turn this show into a Starfleet Academy show. So we had to stop it somehow.
Yeah, I would agree.
Well, the crew are now out in the hallway awaiting judgment. Admiral Janeway eventually comes out and delivers the great news that all charges have been dropped, though she says they won't fast-track non-Federation citizens into the Academy. However, she's convinced them to allow 5 of them to be taken under her wing as warrant officers in training, under her personal command on a ship of her choosing. They're all like, woohoo!
Yes, very deserved.
But Rock points out there are only 5 spots and there's 6 of them. So Dal assumes that it was him who didn't get in, and he acts in a very adult and gracious manner. But Janeway tells him, "Dal, you got in." And then they all turn to Gwen.
Gwen then tells them she won't be joining them. First contact with her people hasn't happened yet, but it will. And knowing what happens, she has to go. She says her father made mistakes, but he was right. She needs to save the Vonnegut in her own way. She hopes hearing about a greater universe from one of their own will open them to a brighter future. Zero calls her Gwendala the Unifier.
That was awesome. Now we can have the Unifier versus the Vindicator.
Yes, and the Hatter.
And the Hat Guy. Although maybe with her going there sooner, maybe she'll just bring their civil war on sooner. I guess we'll see.
Oh, she will advance the intrusion.
Now, as Admiral Janeway is giving a voiceover, we see the crew at Starfleet. Janeway says she grew up in Starfleet, but there are others who have never been under the protection of an alliance or been able to pursue dreams beyond their scope. And today, the crew of the Protostar has been given the chance to discover who they are. And we see Rok-Tahk is now in a cadet uniform, which they need to find a better way for Rock to wear a uniform. But anyway, she's visiting like a lab or a library with Murph, and a Starfleet officer approaches her and asks if she's ever considered becoming a xenobiologist. And Rock is very excited. She's like, "What's a xenobiologist?" And she learns that it's about the study of new life forms, which makes a lot of sense for Rok-Tahk.
Yeah, she could learn about lots of cute new animals, seeing as she does seem to really like that.
Yes.
Although she seems to be really competent as a general science officer dealing with the actual physics of the Star Trek universe and space travel. So I question, is she being pointed in the right direction?
Yeah, but xenobiologists can serve on the bridge. There is precedent in Michael Burnham.
True, she's a pretty good generalist as well.
Yeah, she doesn't have to be just a xenobiologist, but if she's looking for something that she can really care about, this is a good example of something that she is really interested in. There's a couple of little Easter eggs in this scene. One of them is that the character who talks to Rock is based on and voiced by real-life scientist, she's an astrophysicist, Erin Macdonald, who is the science advisor for the show Star Trek, and someone that you and I saw speak at Comic-Con this year.
Yeah, we went to her panel.
Yeah, that was fun. Yeah, and I recognized her right away in her animated form. And then the other little nugget, there were probably more, these are just two things that you and I noticed, is there appears to be a Starfleet person in the lab.
Yes.
Someone from the All the World's a Stage episode. And I did ping Prodigy co-producer and writer Aaron J. Waltke on Twitter about this exact thing, and he confirmed it. That really is somebody from that episode. I believe Aaron was also the writer on the All the World's a Stage episode. So thank you to Aaron. And by the way, Aaron has mentioned that he listens to this podcast. So
do you think that guy is sitting there talking to the Starfleet people going, why do you keep on spelling the name wrong?
I imagine so, yes. Are you Starflight or Starfleet? I don't get it. We also see Jankum here, and he appears to be being evaluated on some engineering task, and he pretends that he's going to hit it, with his percussive maintenance. And the entire Starfleet team that is standing there, they all duck and protect themselves, but then he transforms his hammer into a pair of pliers, and he carefully extracts a bolt from the holo simulation, and then he giggles like he did that on purpose.
Yeah.
It was very cute.
I see a complete Mars O'Brien, Scotty streak running through that.
For sure.
He's in the same class as those guys, so he's the kind of engineer who would find a lot of amusement picking on the Starfleet brass.
And also, I imagine that this is really good for Jankum to have others appreciate him and appreciate his skills when he was so upset about what Dr. Noam said about him.
Yeah, Noam's been assigned to Deep Space 57.
Yeah, let's get rid of that guy.
Yeah, furthest station out at the edge of the galaxy.
He should hang out with the Vindicator. They'd make a good pair.
Oh, now you're into speculation for season 2.
Tahani and George Costanza team up.
As Janeway continues talking, we see Zero get a new containment suit that I'm pretty sure is an Apple product.
That's exactly what I thought. Now he's in an iPod.
It's the i0.
He's the i0. Oh, but they say it's perfect. Oh, it's so cute.
Yeah, he's very happy. Well, it's definitely an upgrade from the original series. I mean, they used to just carry Medusans around in a box, so...
That is so true. Upgrades all around.
Dal and Gwyn are in what looks like an astral navigation suite, and he makes the joke, to think the two of us would be in cat boots.
Oh.
And she corrects him saying, cahoots, which is a callback to the episode at the start of the season where they were on Tars Lamora. And Gwyn used the wrong word.
Right.
Nice touch.
Yeah, and there have been a couple of times where Gwen has said something a little peculiar, and I forgot about the first half of the season where this would happen on occasion. She would just use the wrong term, and I totally spaced that out. And she's done it a few times since.
I still want to know what the feral human was.
Well, yeah, I think that was it, though. She was just picking the wrong words.
Well, Gwyn has managed to match a star cluster to one that's visible in the Solum hologram program, so she knows where her homeworld is.
Yeah.
Dal says, he's still out there, your father. Gwyn chuckles, saying, crazy, huh? Time travel. Or to quote Mars O'Brien, I hate temporal mechanics.
Yeah, she might find her father and he'll be younger than her at this point.
Yeah.
That's creepy.
Dal tells her he doesn't want her to leave, and she says, I know, and puts her hand on his, and she kisses him.
At least this time, everyone was on board with the kiss.
Yes, a much better moment for it.
Yeah.
Dal says, promise me we'll see each other again. And Gwyn replies, we got this far, didn't we? When do you think they're going to discover long-distance relationships don't work?
Oh, after the second or third phone call.
Oh, okay.
It'll take a while. Gwyn will meet some nice boy on Solum. Everything will fall apart. The crew is now sitting on the steps outside Starfleet Academy at sunset as they watch Gwyn's shuttle leave. Rocktalk waves as Dal says, I hope you find what you're looking for, Gwyn. And this is just more crying for me. I mean, I'm not sure I stopped, but oy.
Aww.
And then we see a new ship being unveiled, and it's a new Protostar.
Yes. Jankum is super excited by this.
Yes. Admiral Janeway walks up behind them telling them the old ship was just a prototype, but this is a new Protostar class. And they're all excited, and Dal asks, is this our ship? Janeway walks away saying, oh, I have much bigger plans for us. She turns to the crew and asks, are you coming or not? and the classic Trek theme plays again as Dal stops to look at the sky where we see the bright speck of Gwen's shuttle jump to warp. The end.
Oh, fantastic ending there. With the use of the Star Trek theme, perfect. Do you think they fixed the problem that if the protocore explodes, it destroys everything for 25 light years?
Yeah, you can't have a ship that if it explodes, it's actually going to cause a supernova. That's not a good idea. Maybe they found a way to contain it or something.
I just think that's also a nod to classic Trek, where you can have things that basically would make overpowered weapons that they don't use again or doesn't get used as a weapon.
Right.
Think of the Genesis device.
Oh, yeah.
Wait a minute, it can destroy a planet in seconds?
Yeah. Maybe that's a bad idea.
Yeah.
Well, let's move on to our categories, and we will start with what stood out.
Well, there was a number of references to Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home. We'll talk about that in Trekkiness.
Well, I will mention, though, Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan here.
Yeah.
I was watching the Hagemans, the creators of Prodigy, and they were talking about the emotional impact of the end of Wrath of Khan and how they wanted something similar here, an emotional impact to the end of this season. And I would say you definitely got that emotional impact.
Oh, agreed. Yeah.
Star Trek The Wrath of Khan was really my intro to Star Trek. That ending moved me so much. I cried my eyes out the first time that I saw that. The same thing happened to me here as we wrapped up this season. So I would say that if that's what they were going for, they got that.
Oh, agreed. It's an episode that played very heavily on emotion.
Yeah.
And really managed to pull it off with an animated series.
Yeah, absolutely.
Another thing I have is they dialed the music back to 11 on this one.
Yeah, the music was very powerful in this episode. And that, too, is a lot like the Star Trek movies, and we've talked about that before as well. Yeah. As they've gotten to these really pivotal moments, they've used the music beautifully. I was wondering about the Vindicator. So she became Essentia, Tahani, whatever, and she somehow ended up on Janeway's ship.
Yeah.
And what I still don't know is, was she impersonating someone else? Did she take the place of a real person? Or was she just somebody who just got in pretending to be herself and then somehow, managed to persuade her way onto Janeway's ship? But I feel like an important part of this is something that we didn't talk about in the previous episode. When the diviner gets locked in the basement where I kept calling it the basement, but I know that's not what it was. But
yeah, it's the basement.
The room where the living construct was.
Right.
He calls the Vindicator Essentia. So he uses that name. So that makes me think that that is her.
Yeah.
And it's not that she replaced someone else. But what do you think?
Okay, here's my headcanon here. They clearly have extremely effective computer skills, these people.
Right.
The Vanukat, they had the living construct. It can influence and control Federation computers at the drop of a hat. I think they're very, very good at being able to get into the systems. She could create an entire person in Federation computers with her name, saying she's a Trill, and hide right amongst them. Get assigned to the Dauntless. All of these things would probably be no issue for her. So she's created this personality. So her real name, is Essentia. She's just created a Starfleet record. She was an ensign, so she wouldn't be expected to have a lot of experience.
Right.
So, she could manipulate events to get onto the ship. That's what I think.
Okay. So she didn't steal somebody's identity. She created an identity.
That's what I would think, because they do seem very skilled at being able to control Federation computers.
Okay. There's also the scene in the previous episode where they're getting on the transporter on the Dauntless, the Vindicator, Naked Dreadnought, and the Diviner. And the Vindicator says, eliminate anyone who gets in the way. They go over to the Dauntless, but Naked Dreadnought does not do that. He does not eliminate anyone. He disables them, but we learned earlier that he was just going to throw Janeway out of the airlock, so it's not like he has any compassion. Yeah. I thought that was interesting, and this came out when I was watching it frequently. I was like, wait a minute, she said eliminate, but he didn't eliminate anybody.
Perhaps he was starting with the most dangerous of the individuals. So he was disabling the others. He was going to kill Dal, because remember, he was trying to strangle him.
He was.
And that was when Murph managed to interfere. But you're right. At the end of it, after he disabled them, he didn't go back and finish them off.
He didn't.
He went to the bridge.
He had them all disabled and they couldn't do anything. He could have eliminated all of them.
Maybe dreadnoughts are cocky. Oh, yeah. They're not
come
going to
back
be any more
later.
trouble. Yeah, I'll deal with them later.
I'll get him later.
I want to be on the bridge when they turn the machine on.
I hope you don't mind. I have a lot of things that stood out for me.
Really? Please go on.
So the very last shot of Dal,
Yeah.
he is looking up in the sky at Gwen's shuttle that's leaving. Or actually, I don't know if she was on a shuttle, on her ship.
It looked like a shuttle. A deep space shuttle.
And he's got this sort of happy, wistful look on his face.
Right.
And the very first time we see Dal, he's doing something very similar. Way back in episode 1, the first time we meet him, he is looking up at his escape, at least at his escape plan. And I thought it was so interesting that the season for Dal, anyway, started with him looking up at an escape route and ended with him looking up, not at an escape route, but maybe at his future. And it was just such an interesting bookend to the season.
That's a good one. I did not notice that.
Another thing that stood out for me in that last scene, if you watch it very carefully, Zero goes from having legs to no legs, to legs to no legs, to legs to no legs. And I thought originally that what was happening was when he was moving, he would retract his legs and just float because it was easier.
Yeah.
But there were times when Zero was just standing in one place. When Janeway came up to talk to them, and there were legs, and then there were no legs. And there were legs, and there were no legs. And it's not that they were moving.
When Zero gets tired, he puts the legs down. Floating takes some kind of effort. So Zero just puts the legs down when he's tired.
And we bounced back and forth quite a bit. And I think that might have been a mistake. I don't want to criticize, but I think that might have been a mistake.
Just making a hard day for the continuity person.
Right. In the last episode, we talked about the emotional pounding that Gwen has been taking.
Right.
On top of all the guilt that she had from the things that she had done, now she watched her father die in front of her just as he was trying to save her. So he was showing something positive, and then the Vindicator just killed him.
Yeah.
So it makes a lot of sense to me because of this, that she needs to go on a journey of her own to find some relief for this trauma and also to transcend from the character that she has been up to the next level of maturity or the next whatever the next thing is for her.
Well, it is a powerful story arc, the idea of the journey leading to redemption, or that the hero on a journey that leads to their own redemption.
Yes, I think redemption is an important part of it because she certainly feels like she needs to make up for what her father has done. But she also needs a way to mature and to grow on her own. And that's something that isn't going to happen to her, especially if we're going to stick her into a romantic relationship at a young age in a closed space of a starship where she could end up sort of being stunted. Whereas this way, just even meeting a couple of non-evil people from Solum, you know, could really help her with her growth.
Oh, those are all really good points. Yes. Something I was thinking about in this was, if she's going to Solum, could she be the cause of the war? Could this thing come down to, when she gets to Solum, is she going to find a divided society or some kind of strict hierarchical society with winners or losers? And she brings alternative ideas, questioning this. And ultimately, it isn't a Starfleet intrusion. It's Gwen.
I mean, that is certainly possible, but it's not a Star Trek story if we don't save Solum.
Yeah.
But when you said that, I had an intake of breath because I was like, uh-oh.
Yes.
So maybe.
Right. All we know about it is it's the intrusion. And we already have seen something of the Vindicator saying, you're not one of us.
Mm-hmm.
They're already othering her.
Wow. Yeah. But it's hard to say because she's going to approach a different Solum than what the Vindicator and the Diviner left.
Yes.
But yeah, she could absolutely be the one who caused all of it. That's funny. That's sort of a sci-fi movie. I don't know if it's the Star Trek story.
Yeah.
I will say that something that definitely stood out for me was I was very happy we didn't undo everything.
Yeah.
We didn't go back in time and undo the living construct attack, you know, all of that. I would have been quite disappointed if we had just erased everything.
We have to talk about the hologram Janeway being Janeway.
Yeah.
We saw that Janeway from Year of Hell in the hologram. She is going to make the ultimate sacrifice to do what needs to be done. And that is a very Janeway.
Totally. But even Endgame, she makes a sacrifice.
Right. A different Janeway does the same thing. So the hologram really is, it's very well programmed.
Yes. Very accurate representation, obviously. Even though she's a hologram, I was just devastated by the loss of Holo Janeway.
Yeah.
I loved how they developed that character, that sort of innocence almost that she had.
Yeah.
And the parental way that she treated the crew. I'm not sure the crew knows exactly what they're in for with the real Janeway as the captain, but it's definitely going to be different. I hope there's another Holo Janeway in our future. I love that. I love that character.
I would be happy with the real Janeway.
There was that moment, though, where Jankum asks if she's going to be their captain, and she says, in a way.
Oh.
What did that mean?
Interesting. Well, I could be cynical and say what they're going to do is put them all on an experimental ship to fly through the wormhole with another Holo Janeway. Because they figure, yeah, we lose these. It's not really any loss to Starfleet. You're going to be guinea pigs on this trip. I mean, valued warrant officers.
Oh, jeez.
And I think the final thing for me with what stood out was the Klingon.
Oh, yeah. Was that the most emotional moment for you in this episode?
Yes.
Wow. I don't think that's bad. I mean, that's just, wow, so different. Certainly the most emotional moment for me was when the crew was all holding hands and they didn't know if they were going to make it.
Well, I think I'm kind of influenced by First Contact and the Worf moment in that, and saw that with this captain.
Yeah.
She's prepared to put her ship in between this incoming fire and the Dauntless to complete her task.
Mm-hmm. She had accepted that was her mission.
Yes.
And she kind of sets her jaw.
She has given her word. It would be dishonorable to not do it.
Yeah, and then the ship powers down and she's like, oh, all right. Well, that was the longest What Stood Out section we've ever had.
Well, there's so much.
Well, let's move on to character development.
Yes.
I think the most obvious thing is how Dal has grown and matured since episode 1. He now has made selfless moves. He tried to sacrifice himself even in this episode for his crew. He also a couple of times was saying, well, if I can't get in, it's okay. The rest of you should get in to Starfleet Academy.
Yeah.
And we went from this super annoying character in the beginning. I mean, they did this to us on purpose.
Oh, yeah.
To this character that now you can cheer for.
You saw a character who went from looking out for himself after being raised effectively by a Ferengi into a Starfleet captain in the making.
Yes.
Or a Starfleet hero.
But a hero, yeah.
The other piece of character development I thought happened here was seeing Gwyn prepared to sacrifice her own personal happiness of becoming Starfleet and making the decision to go back to Solum and try and fix the problems there.
Mm-hmm.
Stop her people's self-destructive path that she knows will happen.
Yeah, that was a very mature move.
Yeah. The final piece of character development, and this accounts for all of them, is I do like found family stories.
That's an excellent point, and that's, again, another thing at the heart of all of Star Trek.
That's true.
Maybe that's one of the reasons why you like it. My last item in character development is about hologram Janeway.
Oh.
Before she sits in the chair for the last time, Holo Janeway has this real look of sadness on her face, which I read as two things. One, she has evolved.
Yes.
And she has learned to care.
Right.
And number two is she knew how sad this was going to make the crew. But it's a moment where the mentor or the parent had set them up with the tools they needed to succeed and believes that they can thrive without her. I'm sure that was built into why I was crying so much in this whole sequence.
No, it's a good point. That is an effective summary of you've seen Janeway teach them the fundamentals about the Federation and about the value systems that they should follow.
And it seems crazy to talk about the character development of a hologram, but that's what happened. And that's essentially why she couldn't upload herself to the USB stick.
Yeah. So basically it was their fault. They caused this.
Exactly.
More guilt for Gwen, you realize.
All right, is that it for character development in this episode?
I think so.
So maybe we should hear from someone else, and let's see how this episode worked as a kids show, and hear from Mahi, our 7-year-old correspondent.
Hi, Mahi. Did you enjoy the episode?
Yes, I loved and enjoyed the episode today. Starfleet and the Federation are now saved, thanks to the Protostar crew. They worked as a great team to come up with a good plan, and hologram Janeway helped execute the plan. Now the crew is happy to be part of Starfleet under Vice Admiral Janeway's command. Gwen is off to Solum to try and save her people. The whole crew gets to do what they desired the most. But the sad part of the episode was that there will be no more hologram Captain Janeway. She sacrificed herself for the crew and Starfleet. I will miss her.
What was your favorite part?
My favorite part was the surprised and happy look on Del Rey's face when Admiral Janeway told him that he would be allowed to work as her crew, even though he was an augment. Del Rey was very sad last week when Gwen had told him that augments were not allowed in Starfleet. He really wanted to be in Starfleet, and his dream came true.
Were you surprised when hologram Captain Janeway deceived the crew and sacrificed herself?
Yes, I was very surprised when hologram Janeway deceived the crew. She never lies, but I understand why she had to lie. If she had not lied, another member of the crew may have been harmed. By lying, she helped all the members escape in the shuttle and made sure Starfleet was saved.
Will Gwen find her way back to the crew? Or will she have her own separate story next season?
I think in the next season, Gwen will have her own adventures on Solum, but will also come back to visit the crew and Admiral Janeway sometimes. She may even become friends with the little boy Diviner and the little girl Essentia on Solum, and help them understand that space exploration is awesome and the Federation are their allies.
How will working with the real Admiral Janeway be different from working with hologram Janeway?
The real Admiral Janeway will have a bigger crew on the ship. The Protostar crew will get trained with real Starfleet members, get to use Starfleet weapons, and learn new things every day. The crew will not be able to turn Admiral Janeway on or off when they get into trouble. Each crew member will get to learn more about their species as they work with the Admiral, while Murph will have to count on Rock Talk for that. Admiral Janeway will be more strict, but may not be right away, as they are still new to Starfleet. She will also teach them new things.
Was there a lesson?
Oh yes, as usual, teamwork makes dream work. The crew worked together to come up with a brilliant plan to save Starfleet, even though they had to sacrifice the Protostar. Follow your passion to learn and do what you really like. The crew followed their passion and got into Starfleet, while Gwen is now headed to Solum to save her people. Stay curious no matter what. The Protostar crew is always curious to learn new things. It is their curiosity that led them to Starfleet.
Thank you, Mahi.
Bye, everyone.
Well, thank you, Mahi. And I think we saw that the reiteration of working as a team is a positive trait.
Yeah, she said that many times. A couple of things that I find really interesting around the way that she now perceives Dal.
Yeah.
You know, she said her favorite thing in the episode was the way Dal reacted to getting into Starfleet.
Yeah.
Which is funny because I would never have mentioned that, but that obviously was really meaningful to her. And if we look back at how she felt about Dal early on in season 1, she did not like him. Yeah, she was very focused on the fact that he was selfish, he wasn't kind, and all those things were true. And now her favorite thing in this episode, even though Gwen is her favorite character, her favorite thing was that his dream was realized.
Yes.
So I think that alone justifies and explains the character arc of Dal and how well it has gone.
Agreed. And I like how she brought up they won't be able to turn the real Janeway off.
Yeah, that's quite funny. She is correct. They will not be able to turn her off.
And I think she will be more strict. Well, more demanding.
Yeah, I think she will be more specific if she is the captain. I also liked her talking about meeting up with the little diviner and the little vindicator. I'm not sure what the ages are of them.
Yeah.
If they age like humans, then she's a little bit early, maybe for both of them. But if they don't age like humans, then it would be quite funny if they were children when she got there.
Oh, yeah. It might be a better way to relate.
Well, it would be funny if she could connect with the vindicator as a child and then they meet up together to fight the future version of the Vindicator. That could be quite funny.
The alternative.
Yeah.
That could be a really good plot point, actually.
Do you picture every time she says teamwork is dreamwork, do you picture her doing finger guns?
Yes.
Yeah, me too.
And I'm on board with her idea of Gwen having her own independent story and then meeting up with the rest of the crew.
Yeah.
I would like that idea.
Yeah, I don't know how that will work. Obviously, we haven't gone into speculation corner, but if Janeway and crew are going into a wormhole that is moving them through time, it will be hard for Gwen to jump in and out of that story. But of course, we don't know yet that that's exactly what's going to happen.
It's all up in the air.
Yeah. As always, Mahi gives us the lesson that she learned, and sometimes it's multiple lessons. What do you think was the lesson of this episode?
Okay, I think the very important lesson for this episode is always buy the largest USB stick you possibly can. Don't cheap out, get the really big one.
That is the lesson.
Yep.
You are so right. I was thinking the lesson was Starfleet Academy or Starfleet headquarters is the happiest place on Earth because everything always seems fine when they get there.
Yeah.
But you're right. Buy the bigger drive.
Exactly.
Never second guess it. Okay, let's move on to feedback. We did get a few pieces of feedback. Our first one is from Cal E.
Cal E writes, I believe we may see the grandmother paradox. Gwyn is actually her grandmother.
I mean, I guess that could happen.
Yes.
I hope that's not what happens. That's weird, but it could be.
We hear of the grandfather paradox.
Yeah.
So this could be the grandmother paradox, yeah.
Yeah, why not? All right, our next email is from Andy in the Midwest, and it is a long one. Andy says, wow, what a great end to the season. The story arc of this show progressed more than I expected. I think I still expect TV to be the way it was when I was growing up, where the first episode set up a premise that lasted until the end of the series. Even Voyager was like that. When this show started, I didn't expect them to reach Federation space until much later in the series, and I never expected them to meet the real Janeway until maybe the series finale. I'm excited to see where they will go in Season 2 and how they'll meet back up with Gwendala. I wonder if Season 1 will end up feeling like a prologue to the rest of the series once we're looking back at it for many seasons in the future.
Interesting.
My only slight nitpick is that I think Starfleet should have known the crew were on their way to Earth long before they landed in San Francisco Bay, but it made for a good scene.
Agreed.
Yes. I wish they had followed up more on Gwen's father commenting that Gwen left him because, double quotes, she met a boy. Like Kim, I was also bothered by that line. I get that he probably just didn't really understand why she left him, and this was the only way he could make sense of it.
Yeah.
But because the show is aimed at a younger audience, I would have liked a more explicit acknowledgement that he understood his real reasons before he died. Kids are pretty savvy, though, so maybe it was understood. I think they got around the no augments in Starfleet rule for now, but I hope they address it more in the future. Like Bashir, Dal shouldn't be punished for something he didn't choose for himself. I wonder if there are any other restrictions for augments. There are billions of lives within the Federation, and only a small percentage of them are in Starfleet. So if this is the only restriction, it doesn't seem like it would be much of a deterrent.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Star Trek by nature is very Starfleet-oriented, so we don't always get the bigger picture on some of these issues. I enjoyed Del's character arc. I remember how much Mahi disliked him in the beginning, and I like how he progressed.
Yeah.
Now that the characters will be working alongside a regular crew, I hope the writers find a good balance between showing the characters' skills and also showing that they're still learning and growing. I don't want to see them being more talented than a trained Starfleet crew every week, like Wesley Crusher.
Nobody wants to watch Wesley, I'm sorry.
But I also want to see them being an active part of each episode's resolution. I've enjoyed listening to your thoughts and analysis this season. Looking forward to next. Andy.
Thank you, Andy.
Yeah, this is a good point about the augments. Like, what else are they not allowed to do? Like, can they not have bank accounts? What is it that you can do to stop them from turning into Khan? Khan didn't have to be in Starfleet to be Khan.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I think we'd have to bring this up with the Department of Genetic Purity run by the Federation.
Okay. We'll check in with them. Yeah, we're just going to make sure they can't get into Starfleet Academy. Everything will be fine. Great points, Andy. Really, really good feedback.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. And Brian M. from Talk Through Media writes, "This might be controversial, and I may change my opinion." Uh-oh. But here goes. I felt like the episode was definitely part 2 of a longer episode, but most of the drama and tension were in part 1. I was a little disappointed, to be honest. I think it would play better if you watch parts 1 and 2 back to back, which I haven't done yet. I loved part 1 enough to watch it 6 times in a row. This one, I've only watched this once. I think I will go back to watch part 1 and then watch part 2 right after. I like how I always watch the best of both worlds. I can't watch part 2 without watching part 1 first.
Brian and I were talking a little bit in chat about this, and I agree that the episode doesn't stand well on its own.
Yeah.
Part 2 just on its own, but it's not meant to be on its own. That's why it's part 2.
Right.
So when you watch part 1 and part 2 together, it is a pretty strong episode together.
Right.
To me, Best of Both Worlds Part 1 is always one of my favorite episodes, but Best of Worlds Part 2 was never one of my favorite episodes. So I do get that. Here we had a lot of other stuff that we needed to do. First of all, we needed an emotional crescendo for the season, and we absolutely got that.
Yep.
And we definitely needed to tie up some loose ends. Certainly in streaming, you don't know when the next season is coming. When you're writing it, it could be a long time, it could be never. So you got a lot of stuff you have to wrap up, and these are only half-hour episodes. So I do agree, this was very different from the previous episode.
Yeah, I saw this as very much as an episode split into 2 parts.
Mm-hmm.
I think, if we're honest, I don't think you could watch part 2 and really get much from it. But it's not designed that way.
Yep.
So it's not like you can criticize part 2 for being what it is.
Right. We also heard from Davia on the Facebook group. Davia said, "This episode left me wondering if there is a season 2. I really like the 2-parter, and this confirms that this is one of Trek's best series. I would like to see Gwyn find Solum and help prevent this, and see Admiral Janeway train this crew." I do believe there is a season 2. I don't even think it's in question. I believe it's being worked on.
Thank you for the feedback.
Yes, thank you for the feedback. Let's move on to our one piece of audio feedback, as usual, from Jeff X-Force 11.
Hello, Star Trek fans. It's Jeff X-Force 11 leaving my feedback about Prodigy Supernova Part 2. Guys, I loved this season. This season was so good. Yes, this was a kid's show, but it held enough for all of us Star Trek fans to draw us in and look at the Federation and Star Trek in new ways. And that's what I appreciate. It is giving an outsider's perspective to Starfleet. And I am excited to see what they're going to do in the following seasons. I really hope that we get to see Gwyn back, and I'm sure they're going to do that. But this was just perfect. Each of the characters playing on their strengths, Janeway just being Janeway, both hologram and real Janeway, and the way that they worked around the Starfleet Academy issue was good. I'm just so happy with this series. I was just leery of what they would do, and being in partnership with Nickelodeon and being, like I said, geared more towards kids. But this is one of my favorite series so far out of the Star Trek universe, because it just shows you how big the universe is and how much room in this universe there is for different types of storytelling that gets told around Starfleet. And it's just perfect. And I really want to thank you two and Mahi and all the other feedbackers for all the input this season. And I can't wait to see what's next. All right, X-Force is out.
I have to admit, I did not think we would get to this episode, and Jeff would say, "Nah, hated it."
That would have been the shocker. But I take his point. I saw a lot of people saying something similar about when they saw that the show is connected to Nickelodeon, they thought it was going to be too childish and juvenile. And that's just not what it's been at all.
Oh, gosh, no. It's really maintained a very, I would say, strong balance of having an appeal that a 7-year-old can watch it and enjoy it.
Yeah.
And old Trekkies can watch it and go, "This is really good."
Yeah.
I mean, that's a pretty hard trick to pull off.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to the Star Trekkiness of this episode.
We had two references to Star Trek The Voyage Home. The first one being the crew crashing in San Francisco Bay.
Yep.
And then the second one is the trial over stealing a starship, the tribunal.
Yes. We've seen a few other trials here and there, like on Lower Decks. There was one. It's a very Star Trek moment.
Oh, yes.
Janeway doing an impassioned speech to save them.
Yeah.
Absolutely Star Trek.
Well, also in Star Trek 4, I think there's the issue of you just saved the Federation. You saved all of them. You saved Starfleet. And you're putting them on trial. I think it should be, we just saved you all. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
At the end, Jankum could have said, once again, we saved civilization as we know it.
That would fit for Jankum. That really would.
Yes.
Also, the music.
Oh, yeah.
That was cinematic. Like I said earlier, 11. They turned it all the way up again.
Yeah. And there was the absolute emotional ending of sacrifice, but still somehow hope.
Yeah.
That is very much from the movies.
Oh, agreed. I mean, Wrath of Khan, like you said, save the ship at the cost of Spock.
Right.
Should I say spoiler before that?
No. That movie is older than most of the people who are going to be listening to this podcast.
I also have to bring up, I think this show really nicely brings up the idealism of the Federation.
Yes.
And of Star Trek.
Yeah, certainly that part where it lets you explore your interests and your talents and become the best you can be, right? That whole thing that Jean-Luc Picard talks about of just bettering ourselves.
Right.
We wrapped up the season with a speech from Janeway about it. But we didn't even need the speech. We could see it happening.
Yes.
But you needed the speech because it was a Star Trek thing.
It's always best to have a speech. At the last episode, I mean, one of the great moments of Deep Space Nine, season 1, was at the end of the season with Sisko's speech to Vedic Win.
Yeah, it's very common. So what about Star Warsiness?
100% Trek.
Agreed. This was all Trek. All right, we skipped our rating last week. So do you want to do a rating for each part, or do you want to do a rating of the two of them together?
I think the only way to do an honest rating is the two together.
Okay.
And it's a 10.
I absolutely loved it. I'll also give it a 10. It felt like a movie. It was awesome. I laughed. I cried. 10. Great job to the people who created the show. So much fun.
Okay. As this episode is running pretty long, we're not going to wrap up with a speculation corner because we're going to do a final episode where we'll talk about what we thought of the show, the impact of the show, and most importantly, a very long speculation section where we talk about all the ideas of what could possibly happen.
Yeah, that's a great idea. We'll do that sometime in the next couple of weeks. We don't have a schedule for it yet, but if you want to send us your analysis or thoughts about the overall season 1 and about what you think is going to happen in season 2, you can do that through our usual channels, facebook.com/groups/Star Trek TTM podcasts, or just send us an email, ReBingeIt@gmail.com. And TalkThroughMedia.com also lets you record audio if you want to do it that way. But we will be back with a wrap-up episode, and hopefully we'll have some more news about season 2. Okay, so the last thing for us to do is to say, again, we can be reached at ReBingeIt@gmail.com. We're also on Twitter and Instagram at ReBingeIt.
And don't forget to follow our Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast called ReBinge Deep Space Nine. Available everywhere you get your podcasts, and on YouTube at RebingeIt.
Talk Through Media also has a Patreon, which is in support of all the podcasts in the network, and that is patreon.com/Star Trek TTM.
Well, that's it for season 1 of Star Trek Prodigy, a ReBinge It podcast. Come back in a couple of weeks for our wrap-up episode and speculation for the future.
That's it for me.
And that's it from me.
Oh, and listen to Janeway.
And don't be a Borg.